Hello, 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 and welcome once again to Not a Prog Reborn, but our final day of Secret of Strixhaven spoiler review. My name is M. Kosler, longtime Magic the Gathering player, fan, been playing for 25 years since the start of the onslaught block. Not been playing the entire time. Have had breaks here and there, but have been pretty far back into Magic since, let's say, end of Bloomburrow, beginning of Duskmourn. Primarily a Magic the Gathering arena player these days. Consistent Mythic, Best of One Standard, and Mythic Limited player. We've been talking about the upcoming Secrets of Strixhaven set, or Magic's Return to Universes Within. Road stop for Universes Within. I think we're going right back to Universes Beyond immediately after this. But we've gone through the entirety of the main set. So the only thing we have left are the Mystical Archive cards. If you were not around during the original Strixhaven set, Mystical Archive cards is basically like a bonus sheet style set of cards that are all instants and sorceries of a new art treatment. They're all existing instants and sorceries. I know the original Secrets or the original Strixhaven set technically had a future print of a card that I think was I think it's Adventurous Impulse that came in Modern Horizons 2. I'm not entirely sure if there's one of those in this set, but we'll say, you know, unless I'm mistaken, these are entirely reprints of cards that currently exist in Magic. They are only legal in Standard if there exists another printing that is already legal in Standard. However, they are completely legal in Limited, and there will be one Mystical Archive card per play booster. So again, these are not standard legal cards unless the card itself was already standard legal, in which case it really only acts as a, you know, new art treatment for an already existing standard legal card. But all of these cards will be legal in Draft, very similar to any sort of special guest card that you've seen in other formats, in other limited formats. However, for these, there will always be at least one per pack. In addition, there are actual special guests in the format. They are also only legal in the limited format unless they are reprinting a card that is already legal in Standard. These are significantly rarer. I looked it up right before I went live. For these special guest cards, they will only be in 1 out of every 55 play boosters. So we're gonna talk about them, but you know, if you only dabble in Draft, you might never even see the special guests. But you will see the Mystical Archives cards. Since these cards are only legal and limited, I'm only going to be evaluating these cards from their limited playability. They already in formats where, you know, in other formats where they would be legal, they already are legal. So there's nothing new to say about that. But for this limited format, or for limited in general, that's where my evaluation is going to focus on. With all that, let's go ahead and get started. There's only like 76 cards between both the Mystical Archive cards and the special guests. The rarities range from mythic to uncommon. There are no common Mystical Archive cards. But because there's always going to be at least one per pack, you can kind of think of the uncommons as commons. But you just won't see it reflected in its rarity on the card. But anyways, with all that, let's start with our first one, Akroma's Will. For 3 and a white, we have an instant at Mythic. So pretty rare that you're going to see this. Choose one. If you control a commander as you cast this spell, you may choose both instead. Creatures you control gain Flying, Vigilance, and Double Strike until end of turn. Or creatures you control gain Lifelink, Indestructible, and Protection from each color until end of turn. The card references commander. In limited, there is no such thing as a commander, so you can basically just get rid of that second sentence on the card. It's just for 4 and a white, or sorry, for 4 total mana, 3 and a white. You have choose one. Creatures you control gain Flying, Vigilance, and Double Strike until end of turn, or creatures you control gain Lifelink, Indestructible, and Protection from each color until end of turn. Obviously, this is a powerful commander card. It fetches a fairly high price. I don't have the prices up for these cards, but something like Akroma's Will, you're likely just going to rare draft because it's going to fetch you it's going to pay likely for your draft in paper. If you are playing in, you know, if you're doing your drafting on Arena and the monetary value of the card is not that important, this is still a very good card. I think the last time that we saw Akroma's Will in a limited format was the Final Fantasy set, and it was very good in the Final Fantasy set. This is a way to very consistently end the game out of nowhere, giving all of your creatures Flying, Vigilance, and Double Strike. Even if you don't kill your opponent immediately by making them all flyers with Double Strike, they have Vigilance, so you're not even that worried about the crackback. And there are plenty of situations, this is instant speed, there are plenty of situations your opponent goes for the kill. You can jump your team and completely blow them out with the Double Strike, or give your creatures Lifelink, Indestructible, and Protection from each color until end of turn. Significantly boost your life total when your opponent thinks that they've got you on the ropes. Protection from each color means your creatures are likely going to be unblockable. So you can even use the bottom half for, you know, if your opponent happens to have a ton of flyers, and your board would just be able to kill your opponent if they all got through. You can just use the bottom half to essentially give your team unblockable to get on through. This is kind of plays the role of an overrun, and it is very, very powerful. Being instant speed, even better than an overrun. This is a super, super high pick. I would say pack one, pick one, Windmill Slam. Akroma's Will. Angel's Grace is up next. For a single white, we have an instant at rare. It has split second. As long as you cast a spell, as long as this spell is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. Split second is essentially like super instant speed. The split second basically means this card will resolve before anything else resolves. Basically unable to be interacted with. I don't even believe that if you have 2 spells with split second, you would be able to cast the second spell with split second if the first one was already on the stack. So it's basically just, hey, I want to force this thing through. And what is the effect of Angel's Grace? You can't lose the game this turn, and your opponents can't win the game this turn. Until end of turn, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. Important things to note there. It's kind of a fog, but you know, if you have 20 life and your opponent is attacking you for 20, you know, they're about to deal 20 damage to you. You're still taking, unlike a fog, which would prevent all the damage from hitting you, you would still take 19. You would survive, but a stiff breeze kills you. If they have, you know, a follow-up instant speed burn spell that they can play on your upkeep, you're just dead. Generally, this card has seen play in older formats as part of ad nauseum decks. Ad nauseum is actually printed in the Mystical Archive, so when we get to it, we'll talk about it. As far as limited playability, it's a very, very bad fog. I don't really see a good reason for you to want to pick this card. Outside of possibly, you know, rare drafting in paper. But even then, I'm not sure that this is that valuable. So I would skip Angel's Grace. Like I said, technically there is ad nauseum, but that's 2 Mystical Archive cards at least rare rarity. So very unlikely that you're going to be able to actually do any sort of modern storm, modern ad nauseum style kills in limited. So just skip this card. Armageddon. For 3 and a white, we have a sorcery at Mythic. It says destroy all lands. This is mostly important for introducing this card into Arena. I don't believe we have Armageddon yet in Arena. From limited perspective, it's not really that great. It kind of just slows the game down more than, you know, puts you ahead. Because you're not really... There are a number of mana dorks, and there's a couple of mana rocks in the format. But I don't think in limited you can really set yourself up to break the symmetry of all of our lands get destroyed. Both mine and my opponent's lands get destroyed. So I'm not sure that this is that high of a pick in limited. It might be, you know, a nice rare draft. Might help pay for your draft in paper, but outside of thinking about, you know, monetary value, I would not put this into my deck thinking that it's, you know, that great of a card in limited. Kind of have to build around taking advantage of Armageddon. Due to Beyond Death, this is a existing standard legal card from Tarkir Dragonstorm. So, if you happen to have a deck that plays Duty Beyond Death, it's not something that is that playable in standard right now. But if you happen to have one, you could, upgrade the look of your deck by picking these up. What is Duty Beyond Death? For 1 and a white, we have an instant at uncommon. It says as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I didn't play a ton of Tarkir Dragonstorm Limited. I know Mardu was a powerful strategy in that format. Whether or not Duty Beyond Death was a linchpin of the Mardu strategy, like I said, I did not play a ton of Tarkir Dragonstorm, so I don't know for certain. The card itself seems pretty good. It's uncommon, so you're much more likely to see this in limited, either from during draft or from your random opponent on ladder. I think it seems pretty good in this format, though I think the color being white, it doesn't synergize with the decks that really want to be putting +1/+1 counters on creatures, or gain value from putting +1/+1 counters on creatures. Your increment creatures from Quandrix. You could go Bant, but like we saw at the end of last stream, the mana fixing is really wanting you to be specifically in the 2 color pairs of each of the schools. I think it's going to be pretty difficult unless you're going a full converge deck. I think it's going to be fairly difficult to be like a 3 color deck. You're probably, if you are going to be playing beyond just a single school, you're probably going to go to 4 colors. Well, let me think about that again. I shouldn't say that. If you're going to go 3 colors, it's going to hinge on specific colors. That's what I should say. So, for example, Silverquill is the Orzhov colors. Lorehold is the Boros colors. So, a 3-color deck would be in full Mardu for Duty Beyond Death, because you have your common mana fixers for Silverquill and Lorehold. So you can sort of branch off around white. Sultai also works because you have Witherbloom at black-green and Quandrix at green-blue. So it would be a 3-color deck hinging around green. Is there anything else? Quandrix and... So the teamer colors, Quandrix and... Yeah, I guess it's all of the wedges. Quandrix and Prismari is red, blue, and green, hinging around blue. Jeskai, Lorehold, and Prismari hinging around red. And then Abzan is Silverquill and Witherbloom hinging around black. So, all that is to say, Quandrix, which is the deck that mostly cares about putting +1/+1 counters on their creatures, doesn't really fit. Bant is not a really supported 3-color deck. So it's going to be difficult for you to go with a shard set of colors. in your 3-color deck. You're going to need to focus on wedges if you want to go beyond 2 colors. But this could just end up being fine in, you know, Lorehold go wide, Silverquill go wide, Mardu go wide. Helping Hand is up next. For a single white, we have a sorcery at uncommon. This is another card that is currently legal in standard. Return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. In standard, this is, you know, pretty much specifically getting Abhorrent Oculus. In limited, you know, if you have a really good 3 mana value creature, you could certainly pick up Helping Hand. I don't think that you're going to want to play Helping Hand if your 3 mana value if you're just like trying to pick returns just some sort of random thing that's not of, you know, super power level. So I'm not sure I would pick this that highly for limited. I believe this is from Lost Caverns originally, and I did not play a ton of Lost Caverns limited, because that was before I came back to Magic. So don't really have the history with this card, but I would imagine that it's not terribly great in a relatively low powered limited format. Hop to It, another currently standard legal card. For 2 and a white, we have a sorcery at uncommon. Create 3 1/1 white rabbit creature tokens. 3 power and toughness for 3/3 across 3 bodies. Being across 3 bodies is the important part here. There are plenty of, you know, mass pump, overrun-esque effects in the format. And there are cards that care about you creating tokens. I would imagine that there are places for this card. I'm not sure I'm going to pick it that highly. But if I've already got some synergy for going wide, this is a great card to put into the deck. Prismatic Ending. For X and a white, we have a sorcery at rare, and it's a Converge card. This is from Modern Horizons 2, I believe. Exile target non-land permanent if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast this spell. So it's an X spell with a single white. So if X is equal to 0, the number of colors spent to cast this spell will at least be 1, because you had to spend at least 1 to cast it. It hits any non-land permanent. This would be able to hit, you know, deal with any sort of token that your opponent has for just 1 mana. And it can sort of, and it scales up if you're able to get that Converge value. I think most likely in a random deck, 2 is going to be the number of colors that you're going to be able to spend on this. It doesn't, even if you can spend more than 2 mana, if you can only get 2 different colors out of your mana, there's no reason to go beyond 2. So keep that in mind, even though it says X. And because, you know, this is pointing out that it's a Modern Horizons 2 card. The reason that's important is this is a card that was meant for Modern, which is a format that is significantly more powerful than just a random limited format. And it was meant to hit problematic You know, 0 drops, 1 drops, maybe even 2 drops, right? In a random limited format, sure, there are going to be powerful 1 and 2 drop creatures, but they're not going to be that ubiquitous. So I'm not sure that this is, even though it's technically removal, I'm not sure that this is that premium of removal for a limited deck. So I would probably, you know, if it's between this and, you know, the 2 and a black, destroy target creature infusion, if you gained life, deal 3 damage to your opponent, I would take the uncommon, that black card, before I take Prismatic Ending. I would probably even take the 3 and a black, exile target creature with no other text on it before I take Prismatic Ending. If I'm desperate, sure. Or if I'm already doing converge stuff, sure. But it's not a high pick for me. Repel Calamity. This is a reprint of a card that exists in Standard. For 1 and a white, we have an instant at uncommon. So something that you're more likely going to see. Destroy target creature with power or toughness 4 or greater. Pretty conditional removal. I didn't do a search to see what all this would hit in Secrets of Strixhaven. Let's actually do that right now, real quick. Pulling up Scryfall. Set SOS where power is greater than or equal to 4 or toughness is greater than or equal to 4. Uh, 52 total cards. Let's see how many of them are where rarity is not rare. 43. Okay, so it hits more things than I thought. Let's think about how many total creatures don't have power or toughness greater than 4. I guess it doesn't like my how I'm trying to do this query here. Let's duplicate where power is less than or equal to 3 and toughness is less than or equal to 3, and the rarity and not rare. So 67 total. So about 1/3 of creatures Repel Calamity would be able to hit. 2/3 it would not. Obviously things can change based off of you know, it wasn't counting in the 2/3 that it would not. That also includes things like fractal creatures or creatures with an X that enter the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters. There's also obviously your opponent pumps a creature up, and this gets to hit that, or they put +1/+1 counters on creatures, and this gets to hit that. So, you know, it's gonna be able to work with that 1/3 and 2/3 isn't, you know, set in stone. But it is still conditional removal. So I probably would not take this incredibly highly. If I'm desperate for removal, I would be fine with it. But just keep in mind that it is not unconditional. Reprieve is up next. For 1 and a white, we have an instant at rare. Return target spell to its owner's hand and draw a card. Very similar to a card called Remand. If you've played any arena powered cube, you know this card. And I would caution, like I've cautioned with a bunch of other cards that we've seen, like the brainstorm that we saw was the signature spell of another creature that we have in this set. Do not evaluate these cards based off of how good they are in a constructed format or even, you know, arena powered cube. When you're dealing with a much lower power format, cards, you have to reevaluate these cards, right? Reprieve becomes powerful, or is something that has power in arena powered cube or vintage cube on Magic the Gathering Online, because often you just need one turn to win. You just need to slow your combo opponent down a little bit, stop their game plan just a little bit, and your aggressive deck will be able to get the job done. Or you're a combo player and you just need a little bit of protection, and it doesn't matter if this isn't something that actually, you know, counters the spell that your opponent tried to play, because you're going to win the game on the turn that you cast Reprieve. In a low power limited format, that's much less likely to happen, where the same turn that you cast Reprieve, or if you're casting it during your opponent's turn, when you untap, you just end up winning because you made them stumble ever so slightly. So this is another card where I would say pump the brakes on picking this up for your limited deck. I'm sure you're going to have a story where this is going to be great, and it's not terrible, because even though it's not a hard counter for your opponent, it does cycle itself. But I wouldn't think about how good this is in Arena Powered Cube, in Vintage Cube, and think that it's going to be just as good in Secrets of Strixhaven Limited. Requisition Raid, another reprint for a standard legal card. For a single white, we have a sorcery at uncommon, and it has Spree. This is essentially Kicker from Outlaws at Thunder Junction. You can pay an additional generic, so for a total of 1 and a white, to destroy target artifact. Or you can pay 1 and a white to destroy target enchantment. Or you can pay 1 and a white to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. And you can also keep adding to the amount of mana that you spend to have as many of these effects that you want. You can't double up on the same effect over and over, but you can pay, say, 2 and a white to destroy both an artifact and an enchantment. Or 3 and a white to get all 3 of these effects. Ultimately, I wasn't playing limited during Thunder Junction Limited, so I don't know how well this card played out. Ultimately, I think this is pretty sideboardy, where you're going to pick this up if you need, a disenchant that has, some main board implications if you are sort of a go wide lore hold or go wide Silver Quill deck. Because if your opponent doesn't have good artifacts or enchantments for you to kill, you can just mass pump your team. It is sorcery speed, so keep that in mind. Other thing that I would say bumps this down is there aren't a ton of important artifacts and enchantments. There isn't like a Banishing Light floating around in the format. So it might not be that important for you to have access to a disenchant in your deck, but like I said, probably a sideboard card in a limited deck. Return to the ranks. This would be incredible if it was actually standard legal, but it is not. For X white, we have a sorcery at rare, and it has Convoke. Convoke says your creatures can help cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1 generic or 1 mana of that creature's color. And you can return X target creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is a spell that can be played entirely for free if you have, 2 white creatures and then a couple of extras to bring back stuff from your graveyard. This is way more of a constructed coded card where you build your deck so that it is primarily creatures with mana value 2 or less. Not to say that if you pick this up early enough, you can't build a really low to the ground Loreholder Silverquill deck and be able to regain all of that back. But there's no aristocrat. I shouldn't say there's no, but there's not a heavy aristocrats theme going on. So you're primarily, the way that you would get your creatures into the graveyard is just through creature combat, which is relatively slow. So I think this is not that much of a player in limited. And like I said at the start of the stream, this is not legal in standard. This is only legal in limited because this was not already legal in standard. Winds of Abandon is up next. Another Modern Horizons 2 reprint. For 1 and a white, we have a... Is it 2? I think this might be 1. For 1 and a white, we have a sorcery at Mythic. Exile target creature you don't control. For each creature exiled this way, its controller searches their library for a basic land card. Those players put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So it's a sorcery speed, path to exile that can't target your own creatures and costs 1 extra mana. But it also has Overload, which is an existing mechanic. For 4 white, you may cast this spell for its Overload cost. If you do, change target in its text to each. So it would read, if you cast it for its Overload cost, it would read, exile each creature you don't control. For each creature exiled this way, its controller searches their library for a basic land card. Those players put those cards on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So in a pinch, it is a path to exile, which when we talked about Evoke, we talked about way back on the first stream that we did this, this review. We talked about all the upsides and downsides of a path to exile, right? Even in limited, don't just go willy-nilly you casting Evoke, and don't just go willy-nilly casting Winds of Abandon, because ramping your opponent is a real cost. However, Winds of Abandon, if you can get up to casting its Overload, a one-sided board wipe, sure, they potentially can ramp for a ton, but you're likely just going to kill them before they can take any advantage of all the additional mana that you gave them. So this is a pretty high pick. I would pick this. I might pick this pack 1, pick 1. Probably would pick this pack 1, pick 1. In a pinch, single target removal for a very problematic card that your opponent has, and if the game can go long, if you can stall the game out long enough, often will just win you the game when you cast it for its Overload. That's it for white. We now have blue. Brain Freeze is up next. For 1 on a blue, we have an instant at rare. Target player mills 3 cards, and it has Storm. We briefly talked about Storm because we were talking about the red creature, the red uncommon that had Seething Song on it. What Storm is when you cast the spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copy. So if this is the first spell that you cast this turn, you would just get one copy of Brain Freeze put onto the stack, the original that you cast, and you would have target player mill 3 cards. If you cast one, if anyone cast one spell before you cast Brain Freeze, you would get 2 copies of Brain Freeze put onto the stack. And so on and so forth. And a very, very, very powerful card. Banned in many formats. If you play Powered Cube, you've seen people storm kill with Brain Freeze. With typically a combination of Brain Freeze, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Underworld Breach is a 3-card combo kill. We don't have all of that in this format. We do have a number of small spells, cheap spells that we can cast, and we do technically have some rituals, both the Seething Song card that we talked about, and we'll get to it, but at least Pyretic Ritual is in the Mystical Archive for red cards. But I don't think that it's realistic to do an actual storm kill. I'm sure if you'll see an LSV video where he tries to go for it in limited, but I don't think if your goal is to have fun and try and pull it off, world's your oyster. But I don't think that this is going to be that big of a player for an actual factual deck in limited. 1, it's part of the Mystical Archive. 2, it's a rare in the Mystical Archive. And 3, I think the pieces that you would really need to do an actual factual storm kill mostly also come from the Mystical Archives. So you're not going to see a ton of them to build together. You can point this mill at yourself. There is some graveyard synergy in the format, but it's not a big thing. In Lorehold, there's a little bit of graveyard shenanigans, but this is in blue. In what else? Witherbloom does have some, recursion, raise dead effects going on. But that's, this is again in blue. Quandrix and Prismari don't really care about their graveyard. So I don't think that pointing the Brain Freeze at yourself is going to power up those decks that much. So yeah, I think this is mostly an against the odds style. I want to try for it. Fun little deck that you might try to go for, but not something that I would think would be a high win rate in limited. This card, however, I think is going to be pretty high win rate in limited. Cyclonic Rift. For 1 on the blue, we have an instant at Mythic. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. And this also has Overload for 6 in a blue. So if you cast it for its Overload, it would read instant return each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. In paper, you're just going to pick this because it's a $50 or $60 card, regardless of whether it even fits into your deck. But if you don't have any monetary needs, or you're playing online and you don't need more copies of Cyclonic Rift, I think this is still a pretty good card to just put into your blue deck. Instant speed, boomerang-esque. It doesn't hit lands, but you get the idea. Instant speed into the Royal, I guess. That you can overload, and just like with Winds of Abandon, if you cast this for its overload, it's going to win the game. This is 1 mana more expensive. 7 is significantly harder to hit than 6, but this is also instant speed compared to Winds of Abandon, which is sorcery speed. I would think that Winds of Abandon is going to win more games than Cyclonic Rift, but this is a card that you're more fine with just using for its one and a blue. You're not really giving your opponent anything. Just use this as a little bit of tempo play in some kind of Prismari tempo deck, Quandrix tempo deck to kill your opponent. And then you have the out of, I got this big flourish to kill you when I untap. Daze is up next. For 1 and a blue, we have an instant at rare. It says you may return an island you control to its owner's hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. It doesn't say anything about whether it's untapped or tapped. It doesn't say anything about whether it's a basic island or not, though in the limited format, the only islands that we have are basic islands. And it says counter target spell unless its controller pays a single generic. So for Spike, well, let's just talk about Daze first. Daze is a very powerful card. In, Arena Powered Cube, it shows up. Legacy, it shows up. Very, very powerful card. But just like with, what was it called? Prismatic Ending. It's powerful in more powerful formats where your opponent is playing cheaper things. They don't have a ton of mana sources in their deck, so they're really crunched on mana. This is an especially powerful card in Legacy. I haven't really kept up with Legacy for a very long time, so I don't know if, Delver style Wasteland decks are still the rage, but in those type of decks, it's a lot of mana denial. You and your opponent aren't having a ton of mana on the battlefield, so having a free Force Spike is often just an actual counter, and having a free counter spell is necessary in the same way that Force of Will is necessary in those formats to put a damper on the degeneracy that they can do. I don't think that Force Spike is all that powerful in Limited. We saw for, if you're casting this for its actual casting costs in Limited, this is way worse than It'll Quench Ya. And It'll Quench Ya was a fine card in the Avatar: The Last Airbender set, but when you're cutting the amount of mana that your opponent has to have open in half, it's a lot worse. Sure, you get to tap out and then still hold up counter magic, but that's at the cost of de-ramping you. And again, when we're not dealing with a very powerful format, you just having that one counter spell at the exact right moment, often you're just going to untap and then continue on with the game. So I think Daze is fine. I don't really know the actual cost of Daze. Let me look. I should have that up since I've been bringing it up a ton. Let's see. Daze. Currently, this version's going for about $4. That's still pre-release prices. So a lot of the other prints are around $2 to $3. So, you can pick this up to help pay for your draft, but it's not like gonna pay for the entirety of your draft. So I would think more about, is this going to actually be good in my deck or not? Deduce is up next, another card that's actually legal in standard. For one and a blue, we have an instant at uncommon, so a card that you'll most likely see, or more likely see, on the ladder. And it says, draw a card. It's instant speed, draw a card, and investigate. To investigate means you create a clue token, which is a artifact token that has the activated ability of 2 generic, and sacrifice it to draw a card. This card is relatively playable in standard. It was much more playable before Stock Up got printed, but it still sees some play in decks that don't want to tap out on their turn, want to play much more draw go. In limited, it's fine. You know, 4 mana draw 2, which is ultimately what this is. You know, spread out over multiple turns is fine. Is a fine rate. It's at instant speed. It's a fine rate. It's seen play in the past. There isn't much synergy going on with your artifact tokens, you know, unlike in the Avatar set. They had a lot of clue tokens that they were making, but they could use it for like water bending and stuff like that. Here, there's not really much that you're going to do with the clue token other than break it open to draw a card. So I think if you need some card draw, this isn't terrible to put into your deck. I wouldn't pick it terribly highly, but if you're, you know, if the draft is going along and you see this deduce and you realize that you don't have much card draw, perfectly fine to put in your deck. Disdainful Stroke. For 1 and a blue, we have an instant at uncommon, so something you're going to more likely see in limited. Counter target spell with mana value 4 or greater. Given the fact that Prismari's thing is the Opus mechanic, which while it also just triggers off of any instant or sorcery, they get additional value from spells that have a mana value or that cost 5 or more. Given Quandrix has a ton of X spells, and if they put enough X into it to make its cost 4 or greater. Important thing to note, when a X spell is in your hand, the value of X is, when calculating the card's total mana value, is 0. But when it's on the stack, the value of X is equal to what you put into X to calculate its mana value. So if you're playing, there's the X and a green spell, or there's Procrastinate. There's X and a blue, tap a creature, put 2X stun counters on it. If they put 3 into X for 4 total mana spent to cast it, its mana value would be 4 total. Even though in your hand, Procrastinate has a mana value of only 1. Well, not even in your hand. Anywhere else other than on the stack, Procrastinate has a mana value of just 1. Have a question from chat. I'm often confused with what they mean by spells. From Arroyo. Spells in Magic are anything that you can put onto the stack. Anything that has a mana cost up in the top corner. That's true 99% of the time. So creatures are spells, instants are spells, sorceries are spells, artifacts are spells, enchantments are spells, planeswalkers are spells. Anything that you have to put mana into to cast, or anything of those card types that I just listed off, are spells. Lands are not spells. You do not cast a land. You just put it into play. So a card like the Disdainful Stroke that says counter target spell with mana value 4 or greater. If it doesn't matter if it's a creature or a sorcery or an artifact, as long as it had a mana value of 4 or greater, this would be able to counter it. Hopefully that answers your question. Given all that I said about Disdainful Stroke, even though it's not going to hit everything, it's a conditional counter, I think it's a fine sideboard card if you see that your opponent is in Prismari or is in Quandrix, because they're going to be wanting to cast these high mana value spells. Very similar, the last time that we saw Disdainful Stroke, and the reason that it's legal in Standard, is in Tarkir Dragonstorm, because you had a bunch of dragons floating about, and dragons generally had high mana costs, high mana values. So I think a lot of the same rules apply between there and here. If you're playing against, like in Tarkir Dragonstorm, if you're playing against a Mardu opponent, then maybe you board out your Disdainful Strokes, or you keep them in your sideboard. But if you're playing against somebody playing a lot of dragons, you would bring them in here in Secrets of Strixhaven. If you're playing against Prismari or Quandrix, might want to bring in the Disdainful Strokes. If you're not playing against those opponents, if you're playing against Lorehold or Silverquill, might want to board these out. Flusterstorm is up next. For a single blue, we have an instant at Mythic. Counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1 generic. And this also has Storm. So just by itself, without storming off, this is a 4 spike that only hits instants and sorceries. The real reason for this card's existence is it was a way for Wizards to print a sideboard answer to Storm decks. You're not really going to see a Storm deck in Secrets of Strixhaven Limited. Maybe there's random chances where you can get somebody with a 4 spike, and because you're playing it as a counter spell, it's going to at least be 2, because it's going to be as long your opponent plays their instant or sorcery, so storm count of 1, you play your Flusterstorm, you get the original copy, the actual card that you played, plus the additional copy, and you can say, all right, I'm going to have that target the same spell, and so your opponent would have to pay 2 to actually get their card through. But still, it doesn't do anything for creatures, and even in Strixhaven, where there is more of a emphasis on instants and sorceries, creatures are the important part of Limited. Playing to the board is how you're going to win the vast majority of your games. So I'm not sure that this is going to be that high of a pick. Let's see if the monetary value. Currently, this one goes for $13 in the Mystical Archive. I'm seeing prints that are around like the $8 range. So, you know, if you're playing in paper, might end up just picking this up regardless. But might not end up being in your deck. And on Arena, where the monetary value isn't that important, I'm not sure I would pick this up. We brought up Force of Will earlier. Here it is. For 3 blue, we have an instant at Mythic. It says counter target spell, but you can also pay 1 life and exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. This from a rare drafting standpoint, this certainly will pay for your draft. Trying to see what the lowest. Let's see, let's look at it via checklist. What's the lowest? The cheapest I see, yeah, but those are non-legal versions. The cheapest legal Force of Will is $70. So you're gonna pick, if you open this, you're gonna pick this. You're gonna slam it down in paper. It's gonna pay for your draft plus some. On Arena, or if you don't care about the monetary value, the actual evaluation for this card is I shouldn't even say it's only okay. I think it's pretty bad in limited. Again, like we talked about with Days, we brought up Force of Will in that. The importance of cards like Force of Will is in high power, even more degenerate formats, where, you know, if you're playing in Legacy and your opponent's playing Oops All Spells, or they're playing Legacy Reanimator, they can win on turn 1 and on the play, right? And so you just need in your deck a way to fight your opponent for free, even though you are down card advantage, because you had to spend both the Force of Will and a blue card to counter your opponent's single spell, right? And in something like Legacy, where they're playing with Brainstorms and Ponders and Preordains and a lot of card advantage to make up for the fact that they're having to play these Force of Wills, while it's certainly card disadvantage to have to use a Force of Will to counter your opponent's thing, it's not as impactful in a constructed format where you are building around the fact that you kind of have to play this card. And very similarly, in Arena Powered Cube, if you've played a lot of Arena Powered Cube, Force of Will is important in that format, because that format can be degenerate. In a low-powered format, often this is going to be like the worst cancel you've ever played. 5 mana for just counter target spell. That is way more expensive than you would normally want to do. And because you're unlikely to have a ton of card advantage in your deck, the actual you having to 2-for-1 yourself when you play this for free is going to be a significant hit to you. So I'm not sure this should be a high pick, outside of the fact that if it's in paper, it's going to pay for your draft and then some. Pongify is up next. For a single blue, we have an instant at rare. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Its controller creates a 3/3 green ape creature token. The whole it can't be regenerated, we haven't had regenerate target creature or creatures with regenerate for years. And I do not believe there are any creatures, even in the special guests, that have the ability to regenerate. So from a limited perspective, you can just sort of mentally get rid of that sentence. Destroy target creature. Its controller creates a 3/3 green ape creature token for a single blue. You know, in the past, Pongify has been a powerful card, but this is like 13 years ago. You know, the blue sword, the mythical blue swords to plowshares, right? Pongify, Rapid Hybridization, both of those cards did very similar things, and they would see a decent amount of play in Eternal formats, in Legacy, in Modern, etc. These days, you're getting things like Unable to Scream, Witness Protection. We just talked about it, Procrastinate. They've gotten a lot. Blue removal has gotten a lot better because while this ends up playing very similarly to, or having all similar downsides to what we saw with Evoke, I think that's what it was called, the updated Path to Exile card that's in this set. And we just talked about Winds of Abandon. You're going to end up where you don't really want to use this as just, hey, my opponent has some random 2-drop, I'm going to Pongify it. It's a lot easier to see here. I'm turning their 2/2 into a 3/3. I have to have good reason to do that because their 2/2 is providing them card advantage, or is generating tokens, or doing something outsized power level beyond just its power and toughness, because otherwise you're just upgrading their thing. Technically, you can use this on your own creature to upgrade it, but then you're paying a card to turn another card into a slightly better creature. You know, there's some niche cases where that would be fine, but it's not a huge thing. Given all that, I don't think that this is that good for limited, because I think generally this is often going to be either, if not upgrading the thing that you pointed at, it's going to turn into something that's not that much worse than what you destroyed. So if you're desperate for removal, or if you happen to just get this late, super late in the draft, and you see that your opponent has one of the Elder Dragons, right? You can certainly bring it in that scenario. Or they have an Emeritus or something like that. You can bring it in those scenarios, but I would not just play this as just part of my removal suite in some sort of random Prismari deck. Preordain is up next. For a single blue, we have a sorcery at rare. Scry 2, then draw a card. Pretty good card. Not anything to like super write home about, but it's a 1-mana cycler that helps you draw the best of the top 3 cards of your deck. There's all the Opus cards that this is going to trigger as well, so this really fits. This gets a higher pick order if you are specifically in Prismari, but even outside of Prismari, this is still a fine pick. Sleight of Hand, a standard legal card. For a single blue, we have a sorcery at uncommon. Look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library in a random, or not in a random order, just other one on the bottom of your library. Yeah, I think basically the same thing that we said about Preordain. Preordain's, you're not going to have, well, no, it is true. You're not going to have 2 mystical archives in the same pack. So you're never going to be presented with this situation where it's, do I choose Preordain or do I choose Sleight of Hand in a single pack? But Preordain is better than Sleight of Hand, pretty significantly. But if you're in Prismari, I would not scoff at taking this. Spell Pierce is up next. For a single blue, we have an instant at uncommon. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2 generic. A lot of the same things that we said about Flusterstorm work with Spell Pierce. Except Spell Pierce can hit artifacts and enchantments. There aren't a ton of artifacts and enchantments floating around. You're mostly dealing with instants and sorceries. And technically, Flusterstorm can get to above 2 generic that they have to pay if you're in some sort of counter war or your opponent plays multiple things on their turn, right? But they're pretty analogous cards, and this one just is less constricted on what it can hit. I would say a sideboard card, but given the fact that there are so many instances in sorceries in the format, I think you can be fine just putting this into your main. Stock Up, another standard legal card. For 2 and a blue, we have a sorcery at uncommon. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Put 2 of them into your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. Sorry, in any order. Extremely good. The best divination ever printed. I would pick this just to actually put into my deck. And even if... Whoa, this is only $2? That's insane. The Aether Drift one is still up at $7. Maybe the Aether Drift printing is gonna go down, or maybe that the stock up printing is undervalued right now, or the Mystical Archive printing is undervalued right now. But this is a great limited card. Divination is perfectly fine. This is significantly better than Divination. It's gonna find what you need 80% of the time that you play it. Yeah, stock up. On to our black cards. The first one we have, when we talked about Angel's Grace, we talked about Ad Nauseam. For 3 black, we have an instant at Mythic. Reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose a life equal to its mana value. You may repeat this process any number of times. So it's similar to Dark Confidant and Caustic Bronco. There's also the, I forget the name of it, but there's the 3 mana flying one. This is a one-shot of it at instant speed for 5 mana. But you can repeat the process any number of times. When you do the repeat, you don't get to see what's on the top of your library and decide, hey, I want to actually draw it. It's the first time that you cast, or when you cast the spell, you get to go. You immediately draw the top card of your library. Draw, quote unquote. You immediately reveal and put the top card of your library into your hand and lose life equal to its mana value. And then you decide, do I want to do that whole process again? Without knowing what the next card was. So if you've got a bunch of high mana value cards in your deck, this can very easily kill you. Part of the reason why I brought up Angel's Grace I brought up Ad Nauseam when I was talking about Angel's Grace is that's kind of the thing that you would be doing. You either be playing Angel's Grace, or there was another card called Phyrexian Unlife that you would play to lessen the amount of damage, or make it so that you could freely draw a ton of cards off of Ad Nauseam without having to worry about losing the game. In limited, this is like the worst card draw spell you've ever seen. And it's mythic. So trying to do even though you have both Angel's Grace and Ad Nauseam in the format. This is a mythic, and Angel's Grace was a rare. It's magical Christmas land for you to be able to do all that. At which point you're also, you know, you don't have the whole deck going. You don't have your Lotus Blooms or your tons of fast mana. You do have Brain Freeze, but this is all super magical Christmas land. This is not a card that I would put into my limited deck. Rare value wise, you will draft it in paper. It is about a $20 bill, so it will pay for your draft. But if you don't care about the monetary value or you're playing online, do not put this in your deck. It will kill you more than it lets you win the game. You know, we often talk about your life as a resource when we think about things like Bob, or we think about Phyrexian Arena, Unholy Annex, and stuff like that. This is 5 mana. It's not stapled to a creature. It's going to kill you. Bitter Triumph, another standard legal card for 1 and a black, an instant at uncommon. As initial cost to cast this spell, discard a card or pay 3 life, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Probably the best removal in the limited format. Easy pack one, pick one if you don't have a bomb. There's not a ton of graveyard synergy, so the discard a card is not going to be super important, but you know, there's some. But even then, I think that this is pretty good. Pretty good removal. Pretty premium removal. Culling the Weak. For a single black, we have an instant at rare. As initial cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Add 4 black pips of mana. So black, 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 black. Here's another ritual type effect, and this is a pretty big ritual. We're still talking about a rare on top of a mythic, on top of another rare, on top of another rare. I don't think that, even though we have a ritual, I don't think we're going to be putting together a real storm deck. But this is a lot of mana out of nowhere for a relatively small investment. We do have a number of tokens floating around in the format. You know, every one of the schools has some version of tokens. You got Fractals from Quandrix, Inklings from Silverquill, Spirits from Lorehold, Pests from Witherbloom, and I think they're also Spirits from Quandrix, or sorry, Prismari. They're just flying spirits. It's mostly going to be important in, obviously, Silverquill and Witherbloom, because you're in black, and those are, you know, the smallest of the spirits that you would normally get out of them. If you have a, you know, high mana cost, powerful bomb that you get it out super early and it's just going to win the game, then sure, Culling the Weak's going to be pretty good. I'm not sure I put it in just some sort of generic deck to one shot go all the way up to 4. Maybe that's good enough for turn 1, play a 4-drop. Maybe that's just going to win the game. regardless, but well, you can't really turn one go to 4. You would have to have a 1-drop and then turn 2 go up to a 5-drop and be fine with sacrificing the 1-drop that you played. So I think it's going to be kind of hard to navigate for something like that. I do think this has some value. Let me look real quick. About a $10 bill. So on paper, you should consider picking it up. Dismember is up next for 1 and 2 Phyrexian black mana. What a Phyrexian black mana is you can either pay black mana for it, or you can pay 2 life. So this is either 1 black, 1 black and 2 life, or 1 and 4 life. For target creature, an instant speed at rare, target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. Pretty premium removal. Gonna kill most everything that your opponent has. Can go into any deck, even though it's, technically is a black card, can actually go into any deck as long as you're fine with hitting yourself for 4 to cast it. In a lower powered format, I think you would more likely want to be in at least black, or you would more likely want to have some black in your deck, I should say. 4 is a decent amount of life, but I think you're being able to just cast basically unconditional removal for a single colorless or a single generic is pretty powerful. Premium removal in Arena Powered Cube. It's seen play in tons of formats across Magic's history. I would consider it premium removal for Secrets of Strixhaven as well. We got a train coming by, so give me a moment. Feed the Swarm is up next. For 1 and a black, we have a sorcery at uncommon. This is a another reprint and standard legal card. Destroy target creature or enchantment opponent controls. You lose a life equal to that permanent's mana value. Currently legal in standard, does not see a ton of play in standard. Even though I came back during Duskmourn, I was primarily playing standard at the time, so I don't know exactly how good this was in the limited format. I think it's fine. I don't think that it's as good as Bitter Triumph. 1, we're dealing with sorcery speed. 2, this can hit you for a lot more than Bitter Triumph can. Bitter Triumph, you max out at 3, and it can be 0 if you're willing to discard a card. And the fact that this hits enchantments, sure, it provides some flexibility into dealing with a permanent type that black normally doesn't have a good answer for. But in this set, black is mostly going to be paired with green and mostly going to be paired with white, and both of those colors have in the format ways to deal with enchantments. So I think you're primarily going to be using this as creature removal, and I think it's fine, but not as good as Bitter Triumph. Living End. So Arroyo, if you're still around, this is when I hesitated about saying whether a spell is something that has a mana cost. I was thinking about this card in particular. Living End has no actual mana cost, but it is a sorcery, so it is a spell at Mythic, and it has a activated ability of Suspend 3. Believe it's an activated ability. I honestly don't remember all the weird rules about Suspend. Let me go look real quick because I want to get this right. I don't think that any of the Living End printings talk about what it exactly is Suspend, but I do think something like Search for Tomorrow. Yes. Okay. Cool. So it has Suspend for a Suspend 3 that costs 2 black. So what Suspend in means is, rather than cast this card from your hand, you may pay 2 black and exile it with end time counters on it. In this case, 3. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last is removed, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Okay? So, and then what exactly does Living End do? It's the same thing that Bringer of Last Gift does, but on an actual card. And this is also calling back to another card called Living Death that did exactly what this card does. But anyways, each player exiles all cards from their graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures they control, then puts all cards they exiled this way onto the battlefield. So you're basically, each player is replacing their board with their graveyard and their graveyard with their board, right? You're just swapping them out. So the play pattern on Living End or the Superior Spider-Man deck, which is currently a powerful deck in Standard, is you want to fill your graveyard. It doesn't matter if you have a ton, if you fill your graveyard, your opponent is playing to the board, you get to wipe the board and bring back your big graveyard full of creatures, either to just fairly beat your opponent down or try and combo kill them with things like Terror of the Peaks. But that's for Standard. So let's think about exactly what how the Suspend mechanic works. So when you put something on Suspend, that is an activated ability. Your opponent, unless they have some sort of stifle, which there isn't one in the limited format, they can't really stop you from putting the card on Suspend. However, when you have, each upkeep, you're going to remove a time counter. So the next upkeep, after you suspended this card, you're going to, and I believe you can only suspend as a sorcery, though I don't know if anything says or not. But you'll remove a time counter from Living End. So the next turn it'll go to 2, next turn it'll go to 1, next turn it'll go to 0. And when you remove your last one, so 3 turns later, you are then given a window to cast this spell right then and there. That point, the spell is being cast. It is put on the stack, so your opponent can counterspell it. Then, they couldn't counterspell it when you put it on Suspend, but they will be able to counterspell it when it finally gets removed from Suspend. When it's finished, when it's unsuspended, when it comes back. When you remove the last counter from the Suspend card, you're given that window. It's during your upkeep, but you're given that window, even though this says sorcery, You still have you're ignoring timing restrictions on there. But you have to do it. You have to decide, I'm going to cast this spell right then and there. It's not like you have this opportunity until end of turn during your main phases to cast a spell for free. You have to say, all right, we've unsuspended this card. Am I going to do it, or am I going to let it fizzle out? And if I say I don't want to do it, then I lose access to it. I spend all that mana for nothing, right? It is a May, so if you realize that, hey, I've only got like one creature card in my graveyard, my opponent has been self-milling, they've got a bunch of idiots, I've got a nice board, my opponent doesn't, you can go, all right, I'm not gonna do this. You do have an abort button at the very end. But once you press that abort button, you can't be like, all right, maybe next turn I'll do it. Or maybe later in the turn I'll do it. Playability of this. This card, in Constructed, this card is rarely played fairly. The whole point of this card is there were these decks called Living End decks where you would play these cascade spells, generally spells that have they were generally 3 mana value spells, and then you would play a bunch of creatures that were 4 mana value and higher, but they had ways of getting themselves into your graveyard. Cycle them, they had some activated ability that you could use to put them into the graveyard and so you had things that you could do with your mana on turns 1 and 2, even though you're not actually playing, you don't have any creatures or any spells in your deck that had an actual mana value of less than 3, other than Living End. So you would play your cascade spell, and because your deck was constructed in that way, you would always hit. The only hit that you had was Living End. And when you cascade directly into a Living End, you're not putting it on suspend, you just immediately get the effect. So that's what you would see. That's how you would see this card see play in Constructed. I don't really know if they ever played this card fairly. And I don't really think that there is enough self-mill, shenanigans going around that you could really make a good Living End deck. Board wipes are pretty good in Limited, but this is a board wipe that your opponent sees coming from miles away, and it doesn't actually just wipe the board. It can bring things back, and so you have to navigate to the good scenario of, I've got stuff in my graveyard, my opponent doesn't, and so when this thing comes off of suspend, I'm going to get significantly ahead. Very hard to do in a limited format, to build a deck that gets you to that point. Just like with the Brain Freeze, maybe as sort of an against the odds, I want to try and build a fun deck around Living End, but I don't think that it's a particularly viable or very winning strategy to try and do. As far as monetary value goes, for Living End, it's been reprinted a number of times. Yeah, it's only about like $4. So it's fine to rare draft, right? But it's not gonna fully pay for your draft. So consider, mostly consider it from a, how well it's going to work in your deck. Locust Spray is up next. For a single black, we have an instant at uncommon, so something you're more likely going to see. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, and it has cycling for a single black. And cycling is you can pay that single black. It's an activated ability. You can pay that single black and discard this card in order to draw a card. This was from, I believe, Aether Drift, which had cycling synergy. Here, 1 mana for target creature gets -1/-1. That's not very powerful. It's not going to kill a ton of stuff. It is a spell that targets, so it will trigger repartee for like a Silver Quill deck. And it is, you know, worst case scenario, something that you can just get out of your hand to find something better. But I don't think I would pick this that highly. I wouldn't be, if you're very heavily in Silver Quill, you've got a lot of good repartee things, then maybe you pick this up, but I would not really consider this a removal spell. Sheoldred's Edict, however. For 1 and a black, we have an instant at rare, so upshifted. I think the original Sheoldred's Edict for Phyrexia All Will Be 1 was uncommon. It says choose one. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature of their choice, or each opponent sacrifices a creature token of their choice, or each opponent sacrifices a planeswalker of their choice. There's only 2 planeswalkers in the set, but this is planeswalker removal, should you need it. Mostly this is an edict, you know, forcing your opponent to sacrifice something. And it's a good edict in the sense that we do have a lot of tokens in the format, but you can decide, hey, you have to sacrifice an actual creature. Or, you know, if the token actually is the thing that you care about, maybe it's a 3/3 flyer, like the Prismari tokens, you can say, hey, you got to sacrifice that token. So pretty good. Not as good as targeted removal, because you are giving your opponent the choice, but because you get to sort of navigate around the worst parts of edicts in the past, where they could just sacrifice their little tokens, the thing that they are perfectly fine of getting rid of, you can make them sacrifice an actual card that they spent mana on. It's a little bit better. Not legal in standard anymore, and I don't think it sees much play in older formats, so I don't think that it has high mana value or high cost. You're not going to get that much money from it, but if I'm looking for removal, this is not bad to pick up. Smallpox is up next. We talked about smallpox when we talked about pox plague. We have the actual factual here. For black, we have a sorcery at rare. Each player loses 1 life, discards a card, sacrifices a creature of their choice, then sacrifices a land of their choice. I think a lot of the same things that we said about pox plague, we can say about smallpox, but smallpox is a little bit better. In the sense that it's specifically calling out the types of things that you have to sacrifice rather than all permanents. You having all permanents to choose from, so you don't get to play around, you know, I don't have any creatures on the board, so this is just an edict for my opponent. Or I have mana rocks, so me losing a land is less impactful for me than it is for my opponent. That being said, generally with like constructed pox decks, you need to be very in on the strategy and you're unlikely to be able to go that heavy into, you know, heavy discard, creatureless control, lots of mana rocks. It's going to be very hard for you to break that synergy in limited. So I'm not sure I would pick this up for my limited deck. It's technically removal, but there's a lot going. There's a lot that you have to sacrifice to get that removal. Stargaze is up next. For X Black Black, we have a card that's reprinted from Bloomborough. It's a sorcery at uncommon. Look at twice X cards from the top of your library. Put X cards from among them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. You lose X life. So for 3 mana, you get to look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, rest into your graveyard, and lose a life. So it's a lot of mana for what ultimately comes out to draw 1. If you can put more and more into this, it gets a lot better. It becomes closer and closer to a tutor. And you're drawing more and more cards. But you're also taking a lot more damage. I think along every point in the curve, this is going to be not that great. It's, you know, it's significantly worse than stock up. To get to stock up, you got to pay at least 4, and even then you're not getting you're not getting all the way to stock up. And you're having to take 2 life. Yeah, if you're desperate for card draw, I think this is fine to put into your deck, but I would not put too many copies of this into my deck, and I would not think of this as like premium card draw. It's generally pretty expensive. Vampiric Tutor is up next. For a single black, we have an instant mythic. Search your library for a card, then shuffle and put that card on top. You lose 2 life. Powerful constructed level card. Also powerful in Vintage Cube, Arena Powered Cube. The general play pattern that you'd want with a Vampiric Tutor is you wait till your opponent's in step and then Vampiric Tutor, because it's instant speed, puts it on the top of your deck, especially in limited format. Your opponent's unlikely to be able to force you to manipulate the top of your deck so that you lose access to that the card that you Vampiric Tutored for. So it's in that play pattern, it's close to the same thing as you put it directly into your hand. It's not the exact same because you're still trading the card that you would have drawn for the card that you tutored for, but in high-powered constructed formats, if you're tutoring for something, it's likely going to help you win the game that turn. And in paper, this is another card that's like $70. So you're going to pick it up in paper. You're going to draft it. You're going to rare draft it in paper. If you don't care about the monetary value or you're playing online, we talked about when we talked about the Emeritus that had Demonic Tutor on it, that tutors are a lot worse in limited and a lot worse in lower powered formats because, you know, you're not looking for combo pieces. You're kind of more doing it as like toolboxy stuff. I think with Vampiric Tutor in specific, because it's so cheap and because it's instant speed, this is a type of tutor that I would consider actually putting into my deck. If I really need a land drop, this is a land drop. If I really need removal, this is removal. And if it's time for me to turn the corner, I can go and find my bomb. All for just 1 mana and 2 life at instant speed. This is the power level of a tutor that I think is playable in a lower power limited format. Zombify up next. Legal card in standard. For 3 and a black, we have a sorcery at uncommon. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You know, kind of the best thing. Not the best rate of reanimation that we have in the standard, but close to the best rate of reanimation we have. You know, the prototypical reanimation spell. The pickability of this card is directly proportional to the power level of the bombs that you have in your deck. If you've got a Witherbloom, if you've got one of the Elder Dragons, then being able to reanimate it is certainly powerful. If all you have are, you know, for your top end are like dorky commons, sure, it can be fine to bring them back, but it's not going to be as important or as powerful as bringing back one of these huge bombs. So I'm not sure I would pick this highly, but if I had an Elder Dragon or you know, there was that is it 7-drop, I had something like that in my deck, then I would be a little more incentivized on picking up Zombify to go alongside it. Our red cards, starting off with a Braid. For 1 and a red, we have an instant at uncommon. It has choose 1. Braid deals 3 damage to target creature or destroy a target artifact. A Braid has been a powerful removal spell in limited for many formats. If you're in, you know, if you're in red, this is a pretty high pick. Destroying artifacts, like we talked about, there's much more emphasis on instants and sorceries. There aren't really like banishing light style artifacts going around. There aren't even a ton of artifacts going around. So, but given the fact that this is flexible as just 3 damage to a creature, you know, being able to destroy a random artifact is just free upside. So a pretty high pick. Pretty premium removal for red, especially. Big score. For 3 in a red, we have an instant at rare. As initial cost to cast this spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards, and create 2 treasure tokens. This is pretty good for red-based card draw. It's a Tormenting Voice that is instant speed, so more of a thrill of possibility. It costs 2 more, but you get the rebate of the 2 treasure tokens that you could then use on a later turn for some big spell. Considering Prismari, which is one of the red decks in the limited format, wants you to play big instants and sorceries, this is a pretty good card draw spell for a Prismari deck. Unfortunately, it itself is not 5 mana value, so it's not going to trigger Opus, but it's going to help you cast other things that trigger Opus and also help you find your big instants and sorceries. So pretty good card draw for red. Brotherhood's End. Up next, for 1 red, we have a sorcery at rare. It says, choose 1. It'll either deal 3 damage to each creature in each planeswalker, or destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. So kind of like a sweeper abrade is basically what it is. 3 mana for, Anger of the Gods is the one that I mostly think of. 3 mana, small creature, red sweeper. I think generally pretty good in limited. Not as good as an unconditional sweeper, but can generally be fine. And just like with a braid, the destroying artifacts, mana value 3 or less, not going to come up a ton in this limited format, but it's just stapled on there for free. Again, it's not an unconditional sweeper, so I won't... Or it's not... I shouldn't say it's not an unconditional sweeper. It's not going to get rid of everything at all points in the game, but it comes down early enough. If you're a little controlling, this can help stall the game out as you take the game over. Bulk up next for 1 and a red. We have an instant at uncommon, double target creature's power until end of turn, and it has flashback for 4 red. Couple important things to know. We've talked about this when we talked about flashback cards in the actual main set. When you flash a card back, that is a card leaving your graveyard, so that's going to trigger Lorehold stuff. Cards from the Lorehold school that care about cards leaving your graveyard. Bulk up generally is... I would say bulk up is generally not as good as just like Infuriate or Giant Growth, like an actual factual pump spell, because you have to have a creature that already has significant power in order for the 2 mana that you spend to be better than like a Giant Growth, right? You have to have a creature that already has 4 power to begin with. And certainly this is instant speed, so you can kind of play the game of, I'm going to wait until my opponent's made their blocks, and then I bulk up on something that got through. But I think generally in that scenario, they're probably blocking or chumping your big idiot. I think it'd be pretty telegraphed that you're going to be playing a bulk up in a lot of scenarios. It's uncommon, so even though it's a Mystical Archive card, it's something that people are going to have on their radar. Does trigger repartee, but it is in red, not in the Orzhov colors. So I'm pretty low on bulk up. Burst Lightning, however, for a single red, we have an instant at uncommon. It has Kicker. All Kicker is you can pay an additional 4 when you cast this spell, and it'll make the spell more powerful. So Burst Lightning, the actual text of the spell, Burst Lightning deals 2 damage to any target, but if you kicked it, it deals 4 damage instead. So for a single red, it's a shock, 2 damage to any target. But for 4 in a red, 5 total mana, it deals 4 damage to any target. It being 5 mana is important because that does trigger Opus. I would say this is a pretty, especially if you're in Prismari, this is a pretty good pick. Burn to the face, small creature removal, and being able to trigger those 5 mana value Opus triggers in Prismari, pushes us up quite a bit in pick order. Crackle with Power for XXX red. We have a sorcery at Mythic. Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets. So I believe, I know that there were some cubes that played Crackle with Power or had Crackle with Power in them. I didn't play any of those cubes. But I know that it was, but from what I remember, it was a powerful card in those cubes. Those cubes also had a lot more mana generation. But let's just think about the card, right? So if X is equal to 1 for 5 total mana, so triggers Opus, I can deal 5 damage to 1 target. 5 mana to deal 5 to face. It's all right. You know, that's pretty close, or that's a better rate than like a Banefire, right? Banefire would be 6 damage, 6 mana to deal 5 damage to the opponent's face. X is equal to 2. That would be 8 total mana. So at that point, you're kind of getting into unrealistic scenarios. But we do have Seething Song, and we haven't seen it yet, but we do have Pyretic Ritual. We also saw Culling the Weak. So there are some ways to generate a big burst of mana. So if I can get up to 8 total mana, then I can deal either 10 damage to one thing. No, that's wrong. It would be 10 damage to 2 things. So their face and a creature. 10 damage to somebody's face is often just going to kill them, which is mostly what I'm getting at. Right? You're casting an 8 mana spell, so hopefully you're killing your opponent at that point. But I do think that it is relatively realistic to do. This is a mythic, so it's not something that you can really plan around doing. This is kind of more of an against the odds style deck. But if you do see this like pack 1 or early in pack 1, you know, pack 1 pick 1, you're opening pack 1, or early in pack 1, it's a very, very powerful card that will kill your opponent if you can generate those big bursts of mana. But I would only pick this up early in pack 1 if I'm willing to go for it. And it could just, you know, not come together. It's not something that well, is it not something that I would just play in any deck? It's in any deck, it's kind of like bad common level removal. You know, if I'm in Prismari, maybe I'm fine with it. 5 mana, triggers Opus, deals 5 to a creature. Maybe I'm fine with just putting it in any sort of red deck. It is double red, which can be problematic, but I'm talking myself into this just being, you know, just realize that this can be removal and evaluate it higher if you're in Prismari. Empty the Warrens. More Storm cards. For 3 and a red, we have a sorcery at rare. Create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, and this has Storm. It's sorcery speed, which is a little unfortunate. So you're going to kind of have to be doing an actual Storm thing. But with Empty the Warrens, you generally don't have to have a high Storm count for this to be powerful, especially if you're inside your deck, you've got, you know, Mass Pump, stuff like that. You're able to take advantage of the go wide of this. I think if you can get if you're able to cast at least one other spell before you cast Empty the Warrens, then I think that you're fine with it from a limited standpoint. If you can go any higher than that, then you're ecstatic. I wouldn't play this in like a generic red deck. I would want to have a deck that can take advantage of the go wide nature of this card. But if you can, it's not bad. And it's not something that you have to storm very heavily to get good value off of. Jeska's Will. For 2 and a red, we have a sorcery at Mythic. This choose one, and if you control a commander, as you cast this spell, you may choose both instead. Since we are not playing commander, that second sentence, just like with Akroma's Will, is irrelevant for the limited format, so it's really just choose one. Add red for each card in target opponent's hand. Or exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. Important to note there that it's an impulse draw, but it's not until the end of your next turn or whatever. You have to play them this turn. In paper, you're picking this up because this is like a $20 bill. It might even be more than that these days. Let me look. Yeah, it's like a $30 bill. But if money's not important, you're playing online, something like that, you're probably just using this for its ritual side. Well, yeah, I don't know how good this is in limited. Unlike Akroma's Will, which is perfectly fine in limited, because it's basically an overrun, it's going to win you the game. Here, you know, you have to navigate to a point where this is an actual ritual, which is not always going to be true. Since you're not playing commander, you don't have 3 other people, and somebody's going to be, you know, have a grip full of cards. You have to hope that your single solitary opponent has a bunch of card draw for this to be an actual ritual. And then if you use the impulse draw, you had to spend 3 mana for that. Sure, it's play, so, you know, it can help you find a land drop, and then maybe, you know, you wait till turn 5, you cast this, you play a land, you play a 2-drop. But that seems pretty weak. I think this is significantly weaker than Akroma's Will for limited. Mainly because the ritual part of it, which is kind of why it sees play in Commander, is a lot harder to get this huge burst of mana out of, because you're reliant on your single solitary opponent to give you this burst, to be holding a grip of cards, and we're just in a limited format. It's not going to be terribly likely that they're going to have a grip of cards in their hand. So I think this is pretty low, a pretty low pick, outside of paper, where you're going to pick it just because it's going to pay for your draft. Monstrous Rage, the boogeyman, banned in standard. Would have been legal, but they banned it. For a single red, we have an instant at uncommon. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Create a monster roll token attached to it. And a monster roll token is this, you know, this has this whole thing about roll tokens and whatnot. This is the only card in the set that creates a roll token, so we don't really have to worry too much about it. The monster roll token is essentially an enchantment that gets added and attached to that creature that gives it +1/+1 in trample. So the turn that you cast Monstrous Rage, the creature gets +3/+1 and trample, and then every subsequent turn they're still gonna have +1/+1 in trample. They just lose the momentary burst of 2 additional power. And this card's pretty good. You know, it's banned in standard. We have Repartee, which is pretty similar to Valiant and Heroic, which is what you get a lot of the value from Monstrous Rage. There's nothing quite as powerful as Heartfire Hero, but still. There's also Opus, which is very similar to Prowess, which was another thing that took advantage of Monstrous Rage. So I think that with the Repartee, you know, it's a Silver Quill mechanic. There are a number of Repartee cards that are in mono white, so you can put it into a Lorehold deck, or if you want to go 3-color and go full Mardu, then this gives you a pretty good card to trigger Repartee. And I think certainly in Prismari, this is going to be very powerful. With all your Opus stuff flying around. Yeah, Monstrous Rage. Probably the premium pump spell in the limited format. Though we haven't gotten through all of the Mystical Archive. We've mentioned it a bunch. Here it finally is. Pyretic Ritual. For 1 and a red, we have an instant at rare that says add red. Add 3 total red. So it's a ritual, meaning that you get more mana out of it than you spent. In this case, just a single red out of it. Generally, rituals are important in storm decks. Because it's just a spell that you can cast that generates a resource that helps you continue casting more spells to then storm off. This is rare, so you're not going to see it a ton, even though there's going to be 1 Mystical Archive card per pack. And I think even Empty the Wands was rare. I think every Storm card that we've seen has been at least rare. So I don't really expect Storm to be much of anything, but if you really want to try for it, it's there. Return the Favor. This is a reprint from Thunder Junction. For red, we have an instant at uncommon, so something you'll likely see. It has spree, which we've talked about earlier with requisition raid. Its spree options are for an additional generic, copy target instant spell, sorcery spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. And then its other option for an additional single generic, change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. So it's kind of a fork. It's kind of a, I always forget the name of this red card. It's a free red card if you have a commander that does a redirect. It also copies something. There was another red card in this set that had very similar wording, but it only copied instants or sorceries that you controlled. This is one where you can kind of just use this as a red counterspell, either to change the target of the counterspell to target itself, or copy the counterspell and then use your copy to counter the counter. So like it's pretty niche to do. Mostly it's kind of weird red protection. And I don't think that these type of cards are printed often in limited formats, and generally I don't think that they're all that good. There was the Redirect Lightning. That's right. That's what it was called. In the Avatar set. And that card did not see a ton of play. That was just the bottom half, change the target of a target. But it was something where you could either cast for 1 red and 5 life, or 3 total, 2 and a red. And it just wasn't. Taking 5 is a little much in a slower, low-powered format. And then at 3 mana, it was a little too expensive. This is also 3 mana. So I don't think this is that high of a pick in the same way. Subterranean Tremors is up next. This is a conspiracy card. I looked this up because I thought it was a Thunder Junction card, but this is a conspiracy card. For X and a red, we have a sorcery at Mythic. Subterranean Tremors deals X damage to each creature without flying, so an earthquake. If X is 4 or more, destroy all artifacts. If X is 8 or more, create a 8/8 red lizard creature token. You've got this, it tells a good story, right? Yeah, you got this rumbling on the ground because you got this giant lizard that's digging through the earth, and everything's, taking damage as it's digging around. If the earthquake of it is, a powerful enough earthquake, then it's going to destroy all the artifacts in the city. And then upon emergence of this thing, you get this big red lizard, right? Earthquake is fine. It's basically a sweeper, but it's going to miss flyers. There are a number of flyers, so it's not quite a sweeper, which brings it down below real sweepers. The 4 or more destroying artifacts, like we've talked about, not a ton of artifacts lying around, but this isn't. Instead, you would still deal 4 damage to each creature without flying. You just would also get artifacts along with it. 9 mana is pretty unrealistic to get to in a limited format. If you can, though, important thing to realize, you don't just instantly kill the lizard token. It's dealing the damage first, then destroying the artifacts, then creating the lizard token. So you would still get that lizard token out of it. I'm not sure this is that high of a pick. If you're pretty controlling, maybe, but the fact that it misses flyers is pretty rough. And I don't think it's realistic to think that you're going to be able to get to 9 mana to get this big, dumb idiot alongside your board wipe. So yeah, not that high of a pick. I don't think that it's all that expensive either, so I don't even think it's like a rare draft. On to green, Awaken the Woods. For X green, we have a sorcery at Mythic. Create X 1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens. They are affected by summoning sickness. So for 3 mana, you get a 1/1 forest dryad land creature token. So you get a 1/1 creature, but you're also technically ramping yourself. Because it is a creature, it's affected by summoning sickness, so you can't tap it for mana. But 3 mana for 1 land of ramp is has been the rate for a while. We're starting to get better. We're starting to get actual factual rampant growth and shared roots and stuff like that these days. Hold on, I see I do have a ping. Let me see what this is all about. Oh. No biggie. At 4 mana, ramp for 2. That's also very similar to what we get. Reach the Horizon, Circuitous Root, Explosive Vegetation, all, pick whichever one is most relevant to you. You're only getting green forest tokens, so you're only getting green mana out of this. Unlike with like Reach the Horizon, Circuitous Root, stuff like that, where you can use it to help mana fix. I think where this ends up seeing more play, this is a commander card for the most part, used as part of combos. I do think that it fetches a decent price. Let's take a look. Yeah, it's about anywhere from $15 to $20. So, in paper, pick this up. In limited, it's fine ramp. It's not an amazing card, but it's fine ramp. Berserk up next. For a single green, we have an instant at Mythic. This is a card from Alpha, so it's got some weird wording. Cast this spell only before the combat damage step. So what that means is though it's instant, the only time that you can actually cast it is a very specific window. You've declared your attackers, your opponent has declared their blockers, and before damage happens, combat damage happens, is the only window you have to cast Berserk. What does Berserk do? Target creature gains trample and gets +X+0 until end of turn, where X is its power. And at the beginning of the next instep, which would be the upcoming instep, destroy that creature if it attacked this turn. technically you could do it. You could pump up a creature of yours that's a blocker and not destroy it. Generally, where you see Berserk is in some kind of deck that is trying to one-shot your opponent. For the most part, you would see it in Legacy Infect, though there are plenty of other decks where you could also play Berserk. One mana for this effect, significantly better than Bulk Up, right? You're also giving it trample, so even if your opponent has blockers, the thing that you're berserking can trample right over them. It is at the cost of the creature that attacked. Theoretically, you could berserk something of your opponent's and use it as weird removal. Generally, I don't think that's the correct way to play this card. In Limited, though I think it's better than Bulk Up, I don't think that it is significantly better than Bulk Up in Limited. This is much more of a constructed card where you're looking for this big flourishy attack. And it's much harder to build a deck to take a ton of advantage out of Berserk. Crop Rotation, up next. For a single green, we have an instant at rare. As initial cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a land. Search your library for a land card to put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle. In years past, I believe this used to be a money card. It's still $5. They've reprinted it a number of times, so it's crept down. Limited playability. This is almost unplayable, right? We don't have really any good lands to go search for. You know, generally when you're crop rotating, you're wanting to crop rotate into some super powerful land. You're crop rotate into a Gaia's Cradle or a Tolarian Academy. Crop rotate into an Urza Saga. Crop rotate into a Dark Depths or a Thespian Stage. You know, there is that land that is a Pithing Needle, but that's not that important. That's not important at all in Limited. I shouldn't even say that important. It's not important at all in Limited. So this is pretty unplayable in Limited, outside of being $5 in a $5 bill in paper. We will see in a little bit when we get to the special guests. There are 2 special guest lands. You do have to remember special guests are up here in 1 out of every 55 play boosters. So don't expect to find one of those, you know, actually crop rotatable lands in your generic Limited deck. Giant Growth is up next. The prototypical pump spell. For a single green, we have an instant uncommon. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. It's uncommon, so you're going to have to be expecting it being around. You know, one of the best pump spells of all time. Going to make combat miserable. You see your opponent holding up a green, and you're like, oh my god. How do I block around Giant Growth? They haven't put Giant Growth into, like, actual factual Giant Growth in Standard in a long time. Let me see. When was the last time that it was? Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's in Bloom. They're saying it's in Bloomborough, but was this in 393. Let me see. Was that in the real set, or was that as part of like Jumpstart? I think that was part of Jumpstart. It was part of the starter deck. Yeah. So it was not part of the limited format. I see it in Brothers War. I guess it was actual factual in Brothers War. That was before my my return to the the game. But that is a good 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Giant Growth is a very good card. Especially in a format that has Opus, has Repartee. Glimpse of Nature. For a single green, we have a sorcery at rare. Whenever you cast a creature spell this turn, draw a card. In Standard, where you generally see Glimpse of Nature, is in Legacy Elves. They would certainly play it in Modern Elves if it was legal, but they banned it. So in a deck that has lots and lots of very cheap creatures, being able to just go off, play a ton of spells, and not lose your hand is where you're trying to go with Glimpse of Nature. Play a ton of creatures and not lose your hand is where you're trying to go with Glimpse of Nature. That's not going to happen in Limited. So playability, I would say pretty low. It's a $5 bill, so it's fine for a rare draft in paper, but don't think it's all that playable in the Limited format. Knockout Maneuver. For 2 and a green, we have a sorcery at uncommon. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then it deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. Triggers repartee. Is a fight spell. Sorcery speed for 3 mana. A little overcosted for what you want for fight spells, but it does give a permanent +1/+1 counter. Well, it's not a fight spell, it's a bite. So your creature's not actually taking any damage here. But still, even being a bite, you like to see that at 2 mana instead of 3. But if you're looking for removal in green, this is not terrible. Pick Your Poison up next. For single green, we have a sorcery at uncommon. Choose one. Each opponent sacrifices an artifact of their choice, or each opponent sacrifices an enchantment of their choice, or each opponent sacrifices a flying creature of their choice. It's a reprint. It's a card that sees decent amount of play in sideboards. And for 1 mana, it's pretty good as, your Broken Wings style card. You're giving your opponent the choice on all of it. It's all edicts. And as we've talked about, there aren't a ton of artifacts and enchantments. So this is pretty sideboardy to me. In best of 1, maybe you're fine putting this into your main because of the flexibility. But I think this is pretty sideboardy. Royal Treatment. For a single green, we have an instant, and I lied about the rolls. I forgot that this card was here. We have an instant at uncommon. Target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. Create a royal roll token attached to that creature. So I should read the first part of this. So you can only ever have, the thing about rolls is you can only ever have 1 roll on a creature. So if they have another roll on it, that first roll, the roll that currently exists on it, has to go to the graveyard before the new roll is attached to it In this case, it would be a royal roll. And a royal roll is enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has ward 1. So royal treatment is a card that can see play in standard. I think for the most part it's been pushed out by Snakeskin Veil, though certainly, you know, at any random day, any random green deck can decide to play royal treatment instead. For limited, you know, it plays a lot of the same roles as Dive Down and Octopus Form and Snakeskin Veil. And being uncommon, it means just like with you having to worry about playing around Giant Growth, you're going to have to worry about playing around royal treatment. It's not going to show up so much that you're going to see it every game, but it's going to show up enough that you do need to play around it. Shamanic Revelation is up next. For 3 green, we have a sorcery at rare. Draw a card for each creature you control. And Ferocious, you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. This is pretty commander coded. And I believe it's a card that hasn't been reprinted a ton. So I think no, I'm lying. It has been reprinted a ton. It's actually been reprinted in a lot of commander precons. So never mind. Just a card that green commander decks want. For limited, you know, if you're Witherbloom, maybe you can get some good card advantage off of this, because Witherbloom wants to go a little wide. But then you're not going to trigger the Ferocious. I think this is too expensive in general for limited. Speaking of shared roots, we talked about it. And I lied when I talked about there being only 5 lessons. I guess not technically a lie, because this is Mystical Archive. We have another lesson here in shared roots. For 1 and a green, we have a sorcery lesson at uncommon. And it's just Rampant Growth. Search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. We have the Rampant Growth that's attached to that 1 mana bear. We have shared roots as well. There's a lot of good ramp in this limited format. So I think that playing a green ramp deck seems like a pretty good way to go in the format. Triumph of the Hordes. This is a card that I think fetches a pretty penny. Pull it up real quick. Yeah, $20 bill. Triumph of the Hordes. For 2 green, we have a sorcery at Mythic. Until end of the turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and infect. If you're not familiar with infect, creatures with infect deal damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters, and to players in the form of poison counters. And it doesn't really expand on what poison counters do, but poison counters, if you accumulate 10 poison counters, if a player accumulates 10 poison counters on them, they lose the game. So it's kind of similar-ish to like giving things double strike, because instead of having to deal 20, you only have to deal 10. It's better than double strike, because if your opponent was gaining life with double strike, you have to still eat through all of their life. With infect, all you got to do is reach 10. Just count to 10 poison counters. Doesn't matter if they have 1,000 life. They're dead. This is an extremely, extremely good overrun. You're giving all your creatures trample and infect. In Commander, this is, I triumph of the Hordes. Game's over. In Limited, I think it's often going to be the very same thing. And even if it isn't, if somehow your opponent survives, all their creatures that stuck around are now way weaker, because they're taking their damage in the form of, you know, these -1/-1 counters. They're gonna stay shrunk. So pretty much you can read this card as a 4-mana overrun, which often is just 4 mana in the game. So a pretty high pick, I would say. Yeah, and in paper, it's a $20 bill, so just grab it. Veil of Summer up next. A card that's been banned in multiple formats. For a single green, we have an instant at rare. Draw a card if an opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn. Spells you control can't be countered this turn. You and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and from black until end of turn. It's a very weird card to read. It's built to be a Dimir, a blue and black hoser, but it also just makes your stuff uncounterable, regardless of whether your opponent is interacting with it with a blue or black spell. So your opponent casts a blue or black spell, you Veil of Summer, this just cycles. Your opponent casts a blue or black spell, that's a removal spell. You Veil of Summer, you both draw a card and blink the removal. All for just a single green. It's definitely a sideboard card in Limited because it's harder to predict the meta. It was a menace in Constructed because you can you predict how the meta is going to go, and it's like, hey, if Dimir colors are in vogue right now, I can just play these Veil of Summer's main deck and just absolutely crush anyone playing blue or black in my green deck, which is why it ended up getting banned, because it's just such a powerful hoser. In Limited, it's a sideboard card for if you're playing against somebody with blue or black. Giving your random spells uncounterable, in Limited, that's only going to matter for blue. So, for the same decks that you'd want to play this, for the same reason you want to bring this in against blue or black, the uncounterability doesn't change in effect. On to our multicolors. There's only a few of these. One of them is Bring to Light. For 3, a green and a blue, we have a sorcery at rare, and it has Converge. Search your library for a creature, instant, or sorcery with mana value less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast this spell. Exile that card, then shuffle. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. This is in Constructed, this is sort of a combo-y piece. You Bring to Light. Niv to Light is the most popular version of this deck. You do Bring to Light to bring in the 5-color Niv from like War of the Spark. Or to, toolbox tutor up one of your multicolor spells for like removal and stuff. In Limited, if you're doing the Converge thing, you can certainly go and find, if you're able to really get all the way to 5 different colors, you can certainly toolbox out or go find something nice, but you're not going to get the same value you can get out of a Constructed deck entirely built around this card. So I don't think it's that high of a pick in Limited. And I don't think it cost all that much either. So not a big pick in paper. Culling Ritual. I know this used to cost a lot, but they've been reprinting it a lot recently. For 2, a black and a green, we have a sorcery at rare. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Add a green or a black for each permanent destroyed this way. So any combination of those colors. They're kind of a small creature, board wipe, mostly as a commander card, as a way to wipe out your opponent's, Soul Rings and Arcane Signets and other, Fel War Stones. Maybe you're also playing a bunch of, like, tokens and then get this big burst of mana. Can kind of do the same thing here. Is going to be really good if your opponent is very token heavy in limited, but it is pretty conditional and only really deals with small stuff. So I'm not sure it's a huge pickup in limited. And then the price tag, yeah, they've reprinted it a ton since it used to command a pretty penny. It's only about $3 now. Deflecting Palm. For a red and a white, we have an instant at rare. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, Deflecting Palm deals that much damage to that source's controller. This is very much a extremely niche and very tech, and therefore a card that people will only have stories for when it was good. Oh, my opponent went in. They had this huge Bane Fire. They had this huge fireball at me, and I just went Deflecting Palm and destroyed them, right? But then there's, plenty of games where your opponent just swung at you with a bunch of little creatures, and okay, I get to fog one of them, redirect one of them to my opponent's face and die to the rest. Not a very good card. Would not be something that I would pick up for a limited. You can use this to protect a creature, but you can't point the damage that you're reflecting to one of their creatures. It only goes back at their face, which significantly reduces the playability of this card. Expressive Iteration, on the other hand, a very playable card. For a blue and a red, we have a sorcery at rare. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, one of them on the bottom of your library, and exile one of them. You may play the exiled card this turn. Basically, 2 mana draw 2, which is a pretty good rate. And it's draw 2 of the best, 2 out of the top 3, the best 2 out of the top 3. You can go, I'm going to put one card, a card that I want later into my hand, a land into exile that I play off of Expressive Iteration, or that I play this turn, and then whatever one I don't need at the moment at the bottom of my library. This card is banned, I believe, in Legacy. And very playable in is it playable in Pioneer, or is it also banned in Pioneer? Let's take a look. No, it's banned in Pioneer as well. It's playable in Modern. I think it does see play in Modern. Very good card. And I would absolutely pick this up if I was in Prismari. In Limited. And then I believe this is the last of our Mystical Archive cards. Yes, it is. Fracture. For a white and a black, we have an instant at rare. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. Does not hit creatures. Since it does not hit creatures, I think we say no. We don't pick this up. You know, there's like one artifact creature. Well, I shouldn't say one. There's like 3 artifact creatures in the format. One of them's decent. The other 2 are pretty bad. There are no enchantment creatures in the format, and there's only 2 planeswalkers. You know, sideboard card at best. I would not pick this highly. I'd be fine if this, you know, fell into my lap late in the draft if I was in Silver Quill, but yeah, not a card I'm really looking forward to picking or opening. So that is all of our Mystical Archive cards from the format. Again, these are all only cards that are legal in the limited format. If they were legal in, there are these are art treatments for cards that can be legal in standard if they already were legal in standard, but this is not introducing any new cards to standard. Same with the special guests, which is what we're going to get to. And with the special guests, really the only reason I'm talking about these is because we needed to talk about the Mystical Archive stuff because it was important for limited. The special guests, you'll only see 1 special guest in every 55 play boosters. So you're going to have to be drafting a ton before you see basically any of these cards. So do not really expect them to be played against you or for you to draft them. But since we're here, we might as well talk about them. Archaeomancer. For 2 blue, we have a creature, Human Wizard. I think these are all mythic, regardless of whether the original card was a mythic. When this creature enters, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, and it is a 1/2 Human Wizard. Archaeomancer is, you know, a pretty good card. It would be pretty playable in this format, being able to, you know, it's a very slow Snapcaster Mage, but you don't have to immediately cast the spell. You just pick it back up for later. Often sees play in like Blink Commander decks to re-grab the Blink spell to sort of go off in some sort of infinite. Would be pretty playable in this limited format. The body is pretty weak, but they're given the emphasis on instants and sorceries. Being able to recur your best stuff would be pretty good. There is a version of Archaeomancer at 6 mana in the format. I think at 6 mana it's a little rougher. And I think it's in red. At 4 mana you're a little happier, even if the body is a little weaker. Archmage Emeritus up next. This was from the original Strixhaven. For 2 blue, we have a Human Wizard. It's a 2/2 that has Magecraft, which was the original, which is a mechanic from the original Strixhaven. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. For the most part, in limited, you only care about the casting, but we do have Storm in limited, I should say. So if you somehow get an Archmage Emeritus and you also somehow get a Storm card, don't forget to draw cards off of the stormed copies that you got put onto the stack. I would pick this up, especially if I was in Prismari. Murmuring Mystic for 3 and a blue. We have another Human Wizard. It's a 1/5. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with flying. It's fun that we're seeing all the... I haven't been pointing it out, but I think all the cards that we've seen so far have had art in the background depicting its original printing. So this is from Guilds of Ravnica, the Murmuring Mystic. This is a pretty good card, especially in limited. You're in Prismari, you're spell slinging. Just every spell that you get a 1/1 flyer. Yeah, I'd be certainly happy with this in limited. Grim Haruspex up next. Again, depicting the Grim Haruspex from... I guess this is a little different than the one that we saw. Because I feel like the Grim Haruspex from... the original Grim Haruspex was a little more haggy looking. Maybe I'm mixing it up with a different card. Anyways. For 2 and a black, we have a Human Wizard. It's a 3/2. It says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. And it has Morph for a single black. Unfortunately, when we're dealing with these special guests, they assume that you know what Morph is. What Morph is you can pay 3 generic to put this card face down on the battlefield. And it will be a 2/2 creature token. Or not a token, it'll be a 2/2 creature. And then at any time, at basically instant speed, faster than instant speed. I don't know if it's faster than split second. It's a special action, so it might be even faster than split second. You can pay the card's morph cost, at which point the creature would flip back, would turn face up, and become the actual creature that was printed on the front. No longer a 2/2, it is now whatever this creature was printed on the front, in this case a 3/2, that has, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. I don't think that there's no real reason for you to do the morph thing with this card. You're probably just gonna play this as a 3-mana 3/2. There's not a ton of aristocrats shenanigans going on here, so you're not able to get the card draw trigger a ton, and it's only non-tokens. There's a bunch of tokens going around, so this is a fine card, not something to write home about. The body's only okay. You've got a little bit of card advantage on it, but it's harder to actually activate, and there's not a ton of sacrifice outlets in the format. Dualcaster Mage. For 1 red, we have a Human Wizard. A 2/2 with Flash. When it enters, copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. 3 mana for a 2/2 Flash is not terrible. You flash it in. In limited, you're most likely either flashing it in to counter your opponent's counter, or flashing it in to sort of not steal, because they still have their original copy, but copy your opponent's removal spell to then use on something that they have. In Constructed, there's combos that you can do with Dualcaster Mage. This is certainly playable, should you get it. But again, realize that it's very unlikely that you'll ever see this in your limited games. So I would not really play around your opponent having a Dualcaster Mage. Magus of the Library up next. For green, we have a Human Wizard. It's a 1/1. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can tap it to draw a card, activate if you only have exactly 7 cards in hand. So it's a play on Library of Alexandria. There are all these Magus creatures from Magic's past that play on existing cards, but they are creatures, kind of similar to what they're doing with these creatures with signature spells, except it's sort of innate to the Magus as opposed to this sort of prepared thing going on. And it is Library of Alexandria and not Sylvan Library. Anyways, for green for a 1/1 mana dork at the worst, not horrible. It is only colorless, so it's not going to help you really cast much. Library of Alexandria is very powerful, but all the way at turn 2 to get this thing getting started, you're likely not going to actually have 7 cards in hand, so it's a lot harder to do the Library of Alexandria thing. So I'm not so happy if this was the one special guest I saw in my limited playing career for this set. Speaking of Sylvan Library, here is Sylvan Library. For 1 and a green, we have an enchantment that says at the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do, choose 2 cards in your hand drawn this turn. For each of those cards, pay 4 life or put that card on the top of your library. A lot of text there. Essentially what it's saying is you draw a total of 3 cards during your draw step. And for 4 life per card, per additional card that you drew, you can keep that card in your hand. Otherwise, you get to sort of put it in back on top of your library in whatever order you want. So while this is on the battlefield, on every draw step, you can pay up to 8 life to draw 2 additional cards per draw step. Generally, where you see how you see Sylvan Library get played is somebody puts it down early, and they kind of just use it to keep getting the best of the top 3. You kind of run into a lot of the same problems that you do with Brainstorm, that you're kind of seeing the same cards over and over, but you will be looking at least one deeper each time. And it's repeatable, as opposed to Brainstorm, which is just a one-shot. And then you kind of go for this, all right, it's time. I need to actually draw multiple cards this turn. Let me spend some of my life to get it done. Pretty powerful effect. I would be happy to put this into any green deck that I have. Just don't get too eager with your life total. Because it will kill you. Adrix and Nev, Twin Casters. I believe this was from either Strixhaven or a commander product that was referencing Strixhaven. They're very popular commanders. For 2, a green and a blue, we have a legendary creature, Merfolk Wizard. It is a 2/2, or they are a 2/2 with Ward 2. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. It's fine limited wise. There is token creation in the set. 4 mana for a 2/2 is pretty weak. It's really a commander card. Cody, Vociferous Codex. We talked about Cody when we were talking about Page. Cody is a legendary artifact creature book construct. It is 3 generic for a 1/4. It says you can't cast permanent spells. But you can pay 4 generic and tap it to add Wooburg to your mana pool. And then when you next cast a spell this turn, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile an instant or sorcery with lesser mana value. Until end of your turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put each other card exiled this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's kind of, for 4 mana, you kind of get to Cascade, but it's a little bit better than Cascade because you don't have to immediately cast it should you not want to. And then you also get your mana back. It's a pretty powerful card. You kind of want to build your deck around it. You kind of want to put powerful instants and sorceries in your deck so that you can flip Cody into it. Well, I shouldn't, yeah, not kind of. You can't cast any other permanent spells, so you really have to build significantly around Cody. But I think that there is enough support for, you know, sorceries that create tokens that you have the ability to play to the board even without having, without being able to cast other creatures. We hinted at it. One of the 2 lands in the special guest, Literal Library of Alexandria. We saw Magus of the Library. Here is the card that it is referencing, Library of Alexandria. It's a land that you can tap for a colorless, or you can tap to draw a card that you can only do if you have exactly 7 cards in hand. This is an extremely powerful land. And even in a low power format, I would absolutely Windmill Slam this. I think it's a pretty penny as well in paper. Let's take a look. I have to find where this is. This is the only other printing out. Yeah, the only other real printing outside of the original Arabian Nights printing. This is a, yeah, if you see this, Windmill Slam it. Let me look at this again. Am I crazy? Is this not actually in the set? Is this only a arena card? Maybe that's what's happening. It's only that's gotta be what's happening. I think this is only an arena card and Library of Lang is in paper. That's gotta be what's going on. So this is only in paper, I think. Yeah, because the Library of Alexandria would definitely be on the reserve list. And so they couldn't print it in paper. But Library of Lang is something that they could print in paper. But they just swapped it out or either added it to the format. Anyways, now that I think I understand what was happening. Here's a Library of Lang. For single generic, we have an artifact. It says you have no maximum hand size. And if an effect causes you to discard a card, discard it, but you may put it on the top of your library instead of into your graveyard. A very weird card, kind of anti-discard protection. Not really that important. You don't have to lose the card, but you lose access to new cards from the top of your deck if you want to actually put it back. It is a may, so if you're fine with getting rid of the card, then sure. Very weird card. Not something I would pick at all for limited. Does not do enough. Has no impact for the board. All right. We got through it. We are through all of Strixhaven, both the Mystical Archives, the special guests, and the main set. Been yapping quite a bit. This is a fairly large set. When you consider all the main, everything that you can actually draft. It's looking pretty interesting. We'll like to see how the limited format shakes out. Not going to be able to get started on it myself when that much early, because like I said on a previous stream, I'm going to be going to Final Fantasy XIV's Fan Fest. Fun. So I'll have to see how things play out later than the rest of y'all, but I hope y'all have had fun walking with me through this set. It's been certainly enjoyable for me yapping about these cards. I hope to do it again. I believe the next set is the next Marvel set. I may or may not do a yap session about those. I haven't really, outside of the Avatar set. Well, I shouldn't say outside of the Avatar set. I did not for Spider-Man, and I did not for TMNT. And I think I probably will skip the Marvel set, because I believe it is also it's both another small set and another Through the Omen Path set, and the whole Through the Omen Path stuff is ridiculous. So probably gonna have to wait a little while before you hear back from me, but I am glad people enjoy listening to me yap on cards. I enjoy doing it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you the next time that I